Did you know that there were some things that you went through in your childhood and in your upbringing that actually can impact your current relationship? Yes, this is a prime example of how the past can impact the future. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Keandra, and today we're going to talk about the 5 common ways that your childhood could be ruining your current relationship. So before we even get into it today, I want to hear from you guys in the comment section. Let me know some of the ways that you found in your personal life that your childhood may have impacted your romantic relationship as you grew older. And trust me, if you love content like this, you want to smash that like button because I got a little something special for you towards the end that's going to help wrap all of this up. So let's get into it. The first one is safety. My question to you is, did you long for reassurance and security as a child? Now, safety can mean a number of different things. And I know normally what comes to mind, first of all, is people thinking about physical safety. And that's one of them too, right? Was there any type of abuse going on? Was there hitting? Was there all of these things? But safety can really mean a number of things, right? Because there are different ways that we can be safe, not just physically, but are we emotionally safe? That's the one right there. That's the one that'll catch a lot of you guys in trouble. So I want you to think about ways that you longed for security, ways that you needed reassurance as a child. And if you felt like you were missing that, whether you felt like the people who were supposed to take care of you, your caregivers, or your loved ones dropped the ball in this area, it's important to understand safety is one of those crucial things that we all need, especially growing up. We need to know that we are safe. We need to know that we are cared for. We need to know that when something happens in our life, that there are going to be people who are going to come beside us, who's going to protect us, who's going to keep us safe. In a lot of instances, a lot of cases for us, that wasn't the case. Whether that was physically, whether that was sexually, whether that was mentally, we couldn't even express our thoughts and our feelings a lot of the time. So that question for you, did you feel like there were reassurance and security? Did you have that as a child? That's something that I want you to think about. Now let's keep it moving to number 2. Number 2 is intimacy. Did you find that it was difficult for you to trust people and for you to let them in? And this is especially true if you were violated as a child, especially if that was sexually or physically, right? Because at this point, you're supposed to be protected, like we mentioned in number 1, by those people who take care of you, who are supposed to be your caregivers, who is supposed to love and protect you. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of us, and I do mean a lot of us, the ball was dropped. Let's be honest, the ball was dropped for us. And so if the ball was dropped and you were left unprotected and you were touched inappropriately, or you were hit, or you felt like you couldn't connect with other people, this is one of those reasons why growing up, you could have been in a space and in a position where that could be impacting your romantic relationship. So I want you to think about and remember that if you felt like there was not intimacy, that this could be an indicator that this is something that you might want to work on in your adult relationship. Now, when I talk about intimacy, people always immediately go to sex, right? We know we've had conversations about this before, but intimacy is not just about sex. It's about that deep connection. It's about that safety. It's about that vulnerability that we experience with other people. And one of the most intimate relationships that we have is typically with our caregivers. And I'm using the word caregivers because a lot of us didn't necessarily just grow up with the mother or grow up with the father or grow up in a 2-parent home. There are people who are raised by aunts or uncles, or who were adopted, or who were in foster care. So their upbringing in the first few years of their life looks very different than a lot of people. So whoever your primary caregiver was, were they able to be intimate and have that deep connection with you? Because if that wasn't formed early on, especially within the first 5 years or so of you growing up, it'll be very hard for you to connect with a romantic partner as you get older. And the next one is trust. Were you betrayed by those who were supposed to love and protect you? Trust is one of those things that I talk about often, especially in, romantic relationships. But it's really important for us to be able to trust the people who are supposed to care for us. And what happens is, a lot of the times, if you were in a household or you grew up in a situation where you felt like you couldn't trust your parents, you couldn't trust your caregivers, you couldn't trust for them to provide for you, you couldn't trust for them to come home, you couldn't trust for them to buy you clothes, clothes. You couldn't trust them to give you money. You couldn't trust them with your secrets. You couldn't trust them to talk to them about, deep issues and things that were concerning to you. If you couldn't trust them, trust and believe that as you get older and you start forming those romantic relationships and you form those romantic relationships, it's going to be very hard for you to trust your partner. How can you trust someone that you just met, but you weren't able to trust the person who cared for you for the first 21 years or even 18 or however long of your life? So a lot of us have those trust issues because we fear that people are going to leave us. We fear that they are going to leave us unprotected. We feel that they are going to not provide for us. We feel that they may even abandon us and leave us. And that is why a lot of us have this wall up, because we feel like we're going to get abandoned and rejected and left. And a lot of this is rooted, again, deep down in our childhood. And it may not even be something that is very, big or grand. But I tell people all the time that there are moments, those little small moments where trust was broken by your caregiver, by your parent, by your aunt, by your uncle, by your coach, by your pastor, whoever it was. Those moments actually add up, right? So we have all of these small broken trust moments, but then we look up and we realize like, dang, I can't even trust anyone. So when we go into romantic relationships, our walls are up. We're protected, right? We're like, oh no, I'm not gonna let nobody in. I'm hardcore. Ain't nobody gonna break me. But at the same time, when we have that wall up, we're not only protecting ourselves from something bad happening, but we're also protecting ourselves and not allowing the good to come in too. So I want you to think about letting those walls down slowly but surely to allow love and grace and peace and harmony and trust and good communication and compatibility and support and respect and all of the elements of a good, healthy relationship. Let those be able to come in too, because with your wall up, not only are you protecting yourself, but you're blocking yourself from getting all of the goodness too. The next one, number 4, is stress. Did you experience a lot of stressful events while you were growing up? Now, I'm not talking about just little stressful moments like, oh mom, I can't find my shoes, or oh dad, I got a C on my math test. Like, yes, those can be stressful for a child. I'm not going to minimize that, but I'm talking about stressful life events. There are so many of us who have had life-altering events happen to us in our childhood, and we think that it's not a big deal, but it's truly impacting how we navigate healthy romantic relationships as an adult, right? And just some things that come to my mind is, like we've talked about before, if you were sexually or physically violated. How about if there were any type of medical or health issues, whether that was you or your primary caregiver? These are some things that I need for you to think about. What about an absentee parent or an absentee caregiver or someone who was extremely inconsistent in your life? These can cause stressful events as a child. What about how you were raised? What about your upbringing? What about your support system? Did you have friends? Did something traumatic happen at school? Was there a school shooting? Because that's a thing here in the United States, okay? There were so many things that can happen that were stressful, that is very triggering to children. And so if you experience some major life events that were extremely stressful for you, especially if you experience like homelessness or major differences when it came to money and provision, there are so many things that can impact how you view romantic relationships. Because one thing that I know for sure is that if you experienced a lot of stress while you were growing up, upbringing in your childhood, and you experience stress as an adult in your romantic relationship, and you have not learned how to manage it effectively, baby, it's going to bubble up, it's going to flow over, and you are going to be in a position where you're like, I don't even know what to do in my relationship when things get stressful, when things get out of control, when we're not on the same page, when my partner doesn't show up for me in the way that I would like for him or her to show up. What does that look like? You don't know how to self-regulate. You do not know how to self-regulate to be able to be in a space where it's like, okay, calm down. Let me think this through. Let me communicate effectively, because you did not have that as a child. That was not modeled to you growing up as a child. So when you don't have that skill set and you didn't hone in on that as a child, it's going to be very hard for you to implement that on the fly when you need it as an adult. Now, last but not least is number 5. And we're going to talk about communication here because we need to find out. Here's the question. Did your primary caregiver express their thoughts and feelings to you? And also, here's a follow-up question. Were you able to express your thoughts and feelings as a child? Now, this is a huge one, especially in communities of color, especially in the Black community. We are really taught to be seen and not heard type of energy, you know, like us speaking up and sharing our mind and having thoughts and opinions, especially at a young age, is kind of shunned upon, to be honest with you. It's kind of like, be quiet, you're a child, you don't know what you're talking about. Be quiet, sit down, hush, shh, right? And when we express our feelings and when we say, mommy, I'm sad, or mommy, I'm scared, or this happened at school, or I have thoughts about this particular topic, can we do this? Have you thought about this? When those things start to arise, it almost feels like your parent doesn't want to hear from you because they think that you're too young to have an opinion. But in all actuality and reality, what they're doing is they're suppressing your voice. Whew. That just hit me when I said it. They're suppressing your voice. So if you were a child and you did not express or get the opportunity to express your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns, anything that was going on the inside of you, when that was silenced, you did one or two things. You either popped off, they were trying to suppress you and you were like a jack in the box. You were like, bam, I'm going to express all of my thoughts and all of my feelings from here on out. That was something that you experienced. Or the opposite, where you literally just went almost mute and you didn't say anything and you stayed inside your shell and you kept it inside and you never really expressed yourself. You didn't have that model for you. So when you tried to talk, when you tried to show up, you were basically silenced. So what you did was you decided to suppress all of that on the inside of you. And growing up, you were like, I'm just not going to say anything to anybody. I'm not going to share my thoughts. I'm not going to share my feelings because nobody wants to listen and to hear me. And that is a scary place to be in when you don't feel heard, when you feel like you don't matter in the world, when you feel like your words and how you show up doesn't matter, because that's ultimately going to show up in your romantic relationships. How are you going to communicate with your partner when you haven't even been able to communicate with yourself? And so this is how generational cycles and patterns get broken. Because if you do have children one day, it's important for you to be able to teach them how to effectively communicate. And I'll probably do another video on effective communication later, but think about how you can break that cycle when you start sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, sharing your goals, sharing everything that's on the inside of you and not suppressing those. Contrary to popular belief, your voice matters. We do want to hear from you. What you have to say is valuable. And I want to speak that to somebody who never heard those words validated to them. You matter. Your thoughts matter. I want to hear your opinion on this. Your feelings are valid. You don't have to suppress them down. You can say exactly what you want to say and be heard. So, as I mentioned before, I want to give y'all that little extra secret for hitting that smash button, liking, and commenting. One of the things that I have learned as a licensed therapist is that a lot of the work and a lot of the things that we are navigating and dealing with, it can be done outside of therapy. But truth be told, therapy, especially in regards to this topic, childhood issues, childhood trauma, your upbringing, it is best done with a professional. Trying to unpack things that were hurtful for you, those stressful events that we were talking about, that lack of intimacy, safety, all of that can bring up some very not so good feelings on the inside of you. And if you don't have a professional there to help you unpack it and to contain it, it can consume you. Because going down memory lane sometimes can be a dagger to the heart. It can be very stressful, especially when you start to learn new revelations about yourself, about your caregivers, how they may or may not have jacked you up, but also how that have been impacting your romantic relationships. And so if you are not in a space with a professional who can walk you through those, it can be a little tricky. So I want to encourage you, I really do want to encourage you that if you have not sought therapy for some deep-seated issues that you may have had growing up with your childhood, with your upbringing, and just some things that you never really thought about, now is the time. I had those questions after each of the 5 common ways because I wanted you to think about how that has impacted you. If you answered yes to a lot of those questions, if you could raise your hand and say, yeah, that was me. My caregiver did this. My parents didn't do this. Then that means there are some things that you need to unpack. So I hope you found something useful in this video, but I will see you guys next week. Until next time.